can Apple do for the car market?
If you think about a car, what's a car? A car has batteries, it has a computer, it has a motor, and it has mechanical structure. If you look at an iPhone, it has all the same things. It even has a motor in it. So if you try to say and scale it up and go, oh my God, I can make a car with those same components, there's some truth to that.
Why did Apple fail to enter the EV sector and lose $10 billion? Well, it seems Tesla also might have a role to play. Oh, and not just Tesla. Some other EV kings were a reason. We would have even seen another level project from Apple, but they failed. In 2015, Jony Ive, Apple's chief designer, was so excited about a new concept he'd been working on that he couldn't wait to show Apple's CEO Tim Cook. He led Tim Cook to a minivan. Now, why was this minivan so special? Well, Jony Ive tells Tim Cook to sit in the unusual minivan. This minivan is special. It doesn't have a steering wheel, and it can drive itself. Inside it looks fancy, with wood and leather seats. Johnny then asks Tim to give a command to Siri. Instead of a real Siri, there was a lady pretending to be Siri. She stood nearby and spoke with a robotic voice. Tim had to use his imagination and pretend she was the real Siri. Johnny even asked this fake Siri for information about a restaurant they passed by. The actress acted just like Siri would. It might seem like a funny skit, but this actually happened during the early stages of the Apple Car project. With a demo like that, it's no wonder the project didn't succeed. The project later failed, but is this view too negative? Surely Apple saw something promising in the automotive business to not want to get involved. Why did Apple choose to create a car? Why spend billions on the project, and how it ultimately failed? A Bloomberg report states that Apple is scaling down its EV team, called the Special Projects Group, which employs thousands of workers. Bloomberg says the team had a hard time aligning its plans with Apple's main business of making electronics. There are still questions about where Apple would build the cars, especially since they mainly focus on online services. The report suggests that this decision marks the end of Apple's secretive attempt to compete with the EV giant Tesla. Before we begin, let's clarify one thing. Apple has never officially confirmed that they were working on a car project, so they haven't announced its cancellation. However, there were clear indications that the company was exploring the automotive industry. From 2000 to 2022, Apple applied for 248 patents related to cars, which is their second largest category after communication and navigation. Over the years, they also hired many automotive engineers to work in a top-secret lab in Silicon Valley. But the most apparent evidence comes from the California Department of Motor Vehicles, where Apple registered drivers and vehicles for testing. This showed they were serious about their automotive efforts. I mean, even Elon Musk offered to sell Tesla to Apple in 2017, which was during the difficult production of the Model 3. However, Tim Cook, Apple's CEO, ignored Musk's offer. This shows that Apple had been working on some car-related projects for several years. Some of you might be thinking that Steve Jobs wouldn't have allowed such a thing, but you'd be mistaken. According to a Bloomberg interview, Tony Fadell, who managed the iPod project, talked with Steve Jobs a few times about Apple making a car. Jobs considered the idea. "We had a couple of walks," he said in 2008, "about if we were to build a car, what would we build? What would the dashboard be? What would the seats be? How would you fuel or power it?" If you think about it and scale it up, you might realize, oh my god, I could make a car with those same components. There's some truth to that. Even though it wasn't at the top of Jobs' priority list, this interaction does suggest that Apple was considering making a car as far back as 16 years ago. However, it wasn't until 2015 that the first reports of Apple making a car gained traction. By then, Tesla had shown that EVs could be successful. EV sales, especially in the US, were increasing, and newcomer Rivian was already in the development phase. It's possible that Apple aimed to revolutionize the traditional car and shake up the industry. However, the automotive industry is over 100 years old, and EV companies were already making most of the innovations, so how much would a car really be reinvented at this point? There must be a deeper reason. The most logical one is that Apple wanted to continue its tradition of tightly integrating software and hardware. Apple's CarPlay has been around since 2014, so integrating it into an Apple car could offer the best integration. According to CNBC, Apple has considered allowing payments from the car dashboard for things like fuel, drive-thru food, and EV charging stations. For example, they suggest that if cars were fully autonomous, it would free up billions of hours people spend in transport each year, allowing them to use more Apple apps in their cars. This could mean significant revenue for Apple. However, the best understanding of why Apple made this move comes from Tim Cook himself in a 2017 interview. He said to the New York Times that Apple is really interested in self-driving systems. He also said that self-driving cars are like robots. He mentioned that they like to combine hardware, software, and services to find the best ways they work together, because they believe that's when something truly special happens. A perfect assistant like Siri would have been a big part of this, but it would have taken a long time to develop. One of the first news stories about the Apple Car was reported by CBS in 2015. They followed a self-driving Dodge Caravan on the streets of San Francisco, and they found out that Apple had rented the car that year. And there were many times people saw a similar car in New York as well. And there are some interesting comments about it. In the comments on YouTube from 9 years ago, people were already talking about an Apple Car. After that, reports showed that Apple did a lot to make the Apple Car, also known as Project Titan, a reality. The Wall Street Journal reported that by February 2015, a big team of about 1,000 people, led by former Ford engineer Steve Sadesky, was working on the Apple Car project. Apple was also thinking about hiring manufacturers like BMW, Mercedes, Nissan, BYD, McLaren, and Volkswagen, but none of these plans worked out. It seems like even before Apple could really get going, there were problems. Just a year after all the rumors started, some surprising news came out. Sadesky had already left by the end of 2016. Apple had fired at least 12 employees and was starting to doubt the whole project. Sadesky was replaced by Apple's former hardware engineer Bob Mansfield. With so many challenges in direction and leadership, the employees working on the project were already confused by 2018. Both the workers and leaders experienced more changes. By the end of the year, the Washington Post reported that about 5,000 employees were working directly or indirectly on Project Titan. Then Apple got really active. They increased testing in California and at one point had more vehicles registered than Uber and Waymo combined. Also, during this time, Apple bought a startup focused on autonomous driving called Drive.ai. But by 2022, the lack of direction was noticeable. Apple's software chief, Craig Federighi, had serious doubts about the project. Reports also say that employees who weren't directly involved in it joked about the project. It looked like Apple was finally getting organized. They decided to reduce their original plans. Instead of a self-driving car, they're going to make a standard car that costs less than $100,000, basically scaling back what they wanted to do. After spending nearly $10 billion, the project was scaled back. But what ultimately caused it to fail? One possible reason could be the departure of DJ Novotny, a hardware executive who left Apple to join Rivian in January 2024. Reports suggest that he was one of the main people pushing the project forward, so his leaving could have been very harmful to the project. Another reason could be that autonomous driving turned out to be too challenging. However, the most commonly mentioned reason is that on February 27, 2024, there was an internal announcement at Apple stating that the project was cancelled, but key staff would be transferred to Apple's AI department. Many employees from Project Titan will be transferred to support machine learning and other projects. It's evident that Apple has shifted its focus from the car to AI and have decisively changed their direction. Not too little, but it's not too late for Apple. However, Apple may still come out on top according to CNBC. 98% of new cars in the US have Apple CarPlay, which they called a Trojan horse for the automotive industry. And that's the story of the Apple Car. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And until next time, see you all. Thank you so much for watching.